My name's Paul. I'm from the Institute of Project Management. I'd like to talk to you about, first of all, if we're looking, what do we mean by cost and what are the benefits, I guess is the flip side that comes out of executive education. And secondly, how is that different to the benefits that we might receive from, I guess, traditional frontline education, so training frontline operational staff versus executive managers, and what the differences in programs might look like and how that realises the benefits, if you like. So the cost of not doing it. I guess any investment in our business that we make, we genuinely expect a return on that investment. And one simple metric to understand that is opportunity cost. So if we invest $10 million in a corporate education program, and our business, every time we invest a $10 million in production, we expect a $1 million profit, then we'd expect the same thing from our executive education. We'd expect it to be as profitable in its own right as ordinary production. We actually want to see a tangible value out of it. Now those benefits come in terms of profit, obviously, or they can come in terms of avoiding costs, and that was something that Anjali referred to before, the idea that you could save $250 million in costs through improved executive quality. There's also a lot of indirect benefits that are very difficult to measure. And so what value do we place on knowledge, for example? What value do we place on productivity? So as a result of the executive education, presumably our executive managers are more productive, but how do we quantify that difference? Are there social benefits, for example? So by improving our social networks, can we actually improve the way we go about business? Are there organisational cultural benefits? And I don't need to rehearse Anjali's speech to see the benefits of that. And finally, are there benefits to the community? And in a strict business sense, are we improving our brand to the point where people are more familiar with us? And they're all ways that we can get a return on any investment in a business. So when we invest in what I call frontline education, so investing in the people who are actually making the box or the widget or writing the code or building the building, we're generally looking for an investment that returns directly in terms of profit and avoided costs. Whereas when we invest in executive education, we're really looking to achieve these indirect benefits. So we're really looking to improve the productivity of the whole workplace. We're really looking to leverage the social networks and things like that. So for a number of reasons, executive education has to look different to frontline education. And I guess in our experience in delivering in this regard, there's different ways you can go about it, and I'd like to share some of our experiences with you in that regard. Keeping in mind that with this executive education, we're really looking at the indirect benefits. So there's more than just a cost, and a number of you, I imagine, just by your presence here, see the value in investing in executive education. The question is, are you getting the most or optimal return on that investment? And it comes down to the strategy, the educational strategy that you use. First of all, executive education is very sensitive to having real, genuine subject matter experts and not just professional teachers. So executives, when they come to education, already have significant experience, significant knowledge, and they're also used to challenging ideas. So if you're not using genuine subject matter experts in this specific niche that you're trying to develop knowledge capacity, then potentially the session can, or the education can fall down if it turns out that the people who are being educated are actually more knowledgeable than the people delivering the education. So rather than looking, rather than looking for generalists, the more executive, the higher up the organisational structure we go, the more dependent we are on genuine subject matter experts and not just general trainers to deliver the knowledge. Secondly, executives work better in small groups. So there is no such thing as an ideal group size. I know in Australia, our ideal training group size for any level of training is generally around 25, 30 people. In India, I understand it's a lot bigger. It can, you'll have, I guess, group sizes of 50 to 100 people in education. The small groups, though, for executives really drive interaction. And it's important that executives don't just have knowledge shoved on them, but they also contribute significantly to their own learning by exploring ideas, by exploring concepts, by engaging with each other, and by challenging each other as well. So it's not sufficient for an executive to know how to do something. They also need to understand why we're doing it as well. So you also need to use dynamic methods. Now, one of the things and one of the themes of this conference is obviously mobile and online learning and e-learning, as it goes by its various brand names. But e-learning on itself is actually, or online learning on its own, is actually a poor way to train and educate executives. Now, that's not to say it's a poor method of training. We employ a lot of online and e-learning within our own business. But executives really thrive on that interaction and engagement. They also, it's also useful, and this is just a structural thing, to isolate executives from their business if at all possible. Because when you're sharing knowledge with executives, you really need to put them in almost a laboratory, or laboratory is a horrible word, an incubator type environment, so that they can't access their mobile phones, they can't be on call for the immediate business crises for the duration of the training. But that means that you can't take them out of the business for 2 weeks, because the practical reality of the situation is that they need to have that engagement with the business throughout. So it needs to be structured in small, digestible bites that may be supported by online methods, but you can't take them out of the business for extended periods and expect them to remain engaged and get the full value out of the education. The other thing we need to provide executives is toolkits, not manuals. So what we need to do is we need to provide them with like a set of tools that can respond to a variety of situations, rather than just saying, if A happens, then you do B. So it gets away from what we call chalk to board education, where you say, and which is very much what Frontline management or education about, is if this situation comes up, you need to respond in this way, because you can never cover that with an executive, and everyone's situation is different. So it's very much about giving them a set of, I guess, best practices, so that if this situation comes up, they can reach into their toolkit of best practices to respond to it. And the way you share that knowledge is through a lot of scenarios and a lot of simulations and a lot of interaction and so instead of throwing a whole heap of prescribed if this then, what we've found a better way to engage executives is to say, here's a problem, here's some, go ahead and solve it now, and we'll weave into that the best practices that might come out. And one of the things as a trainer that we really enjoy in that situation is we often learn things as well. So that it makes the education easy, it makes it interesting and engaging and enlightening for us too. Executive education should also be cross-functional. So taking people from a single, at the executive level, taking the executives or senior managers from a single business unit only has limited value if they're only solving and thinking of problems that they're going to solve in the context of their unit. So if you can engage with if you engage executives from other business units, and so you get a diversity of experience, and ideally from other businesses within that industry or even from outside that industry, that in itself has huge utility, not just in terms of the knowledge that you gain through the structure of the program, if you like, but also in terms of the experience and those coffee station conversations that you have, or those conversations over lunch, and the knowledge and the networks that are developed through that. Going back to what I said a minute ago about not being able to take executives out of the businesses for long periods and not being able to hold their attention for long periods on a single training subject, it's very useful if training is extended through mentor support. So I imagine a number of you in this room have gone on a training course, received a fantastic set of notes, walked out of the room and said, I'm going to do that tomorrow in my business. And then when you're promoted 2 years later and you move into your new office, you find those training notes and you think, why did I never do that? So I guess one of the to get the most value out of executive education, what you really need to do is have some sort of ongoing support structure. Part of that can be created through the social networks developed through the program itself, but it should also continue beyond and have a formal level of support if possible. Which I guess brings us to the final point of executive education. Too many times, well not too many times, quite often we link, we say this is where our skills gap is, so this is where we're going to deliver the education. And we do training needs analyses based on where the skills gap in the organisation is. And is that something you generally do within your business? So this is where the gap is, this is where we need to be? Yeah, it's a fairly straight strategy, and it's a good strategy. I guess one thing to keep in mind though is that the gaps you identify and the training needs you identify still have a very clear and obvious link, not only to the strategy of the organisation itself, but also to the training that you're delivering down at the front line as well, so that there's a continuity in the theme between the two. So I guess an example from our own experience, we do project management training, obviously, as the name of our business suggests. We will deliver project management training to a group of mid-level managers, like project team leaders, project managers within an organisation. But then they go back and say, but we don't have the governance support or the structures that enable that to be actually implemented to its full value. And the converse is also true. We might deliver governance training to a group of, project change controllers, portfolio managers, program managers. But if we're giving them a set of skills that is unrelated to the operations of the business, then that training is redundant. And that's where the cost of education potentially, you're not realising the ultimate value out of it. That's, in a nutshell, in the 10-minute version, I guess my own thoughts on the topic. I'm really happy to take a quick question or two, but I don't want to steal time from these guys, and I think too that having seen everything we do, there's probably going to be some value out of an extended group discussion. Does anyone have some immediate direct question related to what I've spoken about there though? Oh, yeah. Sorry, I was watching the microphone on the hand.
You talked about differences in education between executive education and frontline. Within the executive education, if you have two or three levels, what would be the difference? So, for example, a VP and a senior VP between a CEO, how would you differentiate that in terms of types of education?
I guess I've created, for the purposes of this presentation, a slightly artificial black and white world. And in practice, so whereas at one end you're doing what I've referred to as that chalk to board, that very traditional classroom structured training, and at the other end that semi-structured open dialogue type training. In reality, it's a continuum between the two. So you gradually, so if you've got, say, a hypothetical mid-level manager sitting there, you are going to have to give them a degree of direct guidance because they don't necessarily have the experience to fall back on. However, they are, I guess, if they've been identified as middle managers and potential senior managers within the organisation, then they do have some experience, and you want to encourage them to think for themselves a little bit too. At the executive end, these people ideally are people who are very capable thinkers and decision makers already, so you throw that over to them entirely, sort of thing. So I guess it's more of a continuum between the education styles rather than just you must do it this way to this group and you must do it this way to this group. So there certainly is. And I guess that comes down to the familiarity of the subject matter that the people have in the first place, and I guess their level of competence and seniority and ability to apply it too. So yeah, it's not something that you can just, it's not something we've found, and we've made that mistake as a business a number of years ago. Here's someone with fantastic experience as a project manager, therefore they're going to be a good project manager. We'll give them a set of slides and a set of rules and they can go and teach. It can't work like that. I guess you need to read your crowd and understand what their specific needs are and build that into the training on the fly sometimes if necessary. Yeah. I will hand over. Oh, sorry, one more question. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, my question was more in terms of training middle managers for aspiring to be future leaders.
Yep.
And in particular, when we have a huge scale, say 30,000 or 40,000 such people who need to be going to that level, say 5 to 6 years down the line.
Yep.
I get the points in terms of having dynamic methods, scenarios, simulations, and so on. But when it comes to having SMEs available, or having small groups of training, or having mentor support, how do we go up the scale when it is such a huge volume we're talking about it?
Yeah, and look, that's one of the big challenges, and that's obviously something that drives the group size. I guess the basic rule of thumb is the smaller the group, the greater level of interaction that you can drive. So if your training is dependent, or I guess if the optimum value is going to be received out of having a very high level of group engagement and interaction and being able to challenge ideas, the smaller the group, the better. But like I say, that is not, this isn't a one-size-fits-all thing. And at the executive level, obviously, at the senior executive level, obviously there's a smaller number of senior executives who need that level of training. Something that's driven by this, going right back to the first slide, Sue, is your budget. How much money do you have to spend? And you do have to appreciate the economic realities that you can't get the perfect efficiency every time. And I guess it's just a case of responding to the unique needs of the client. I know that sounds like a get out of jail type thing, but yeah, you very much, I guess, are bound by that top level budget and the need to get training through in a certain amount of time. What I've described, I guess, is an ideal best case scenario, a best practice, if you like. You just have to work out where the trade-offs have to be in your own business. And really, online, that's where we go. That's why we do so much online, because it's efficient.
Thank you.
Thank you.